ranked standard on Magic Arena. We just had a season reset, so we're going to be battling at the bottom of Platinum, I think. This will be our first foray into this season. We're going to start it off with a pretty janky brew calling Rakdos Forge, based on its namesake card, Urabrask's Forge. Urabrask's Forge is a fun card that has inevitability. If it's not removed at the beginning of combat on your turn, put an oil counter on Urabrask's Forge, then create an X1 red Phyrexian horror creature token with trample and haste, where X is the number of oil counters on Urabrask's Forge. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. The theme of this deck is to survive, play Urabrask's Forge, and then gain a bunch of value from it. Ways we gain value from it start with Braids, Arisen Nightmare, another super fun card that doesn't see a ton of play. Braids is a 3/3 for 3. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So, of course, what we want to be doing with Urabrask's Forge is stacking, and Magic Arena will stack it, usually for you correctly, such that you can sacrifice your Urabrask's Forge token to Braids before you have to sacrifice it to itself. Other payoffs for being able to sacrifice creatures, obviously we've got Ob Nixilis here. He's just a one-of. Got another deck brewing with more copies of Ob Nixilis, I think, underrated card. And Beseech the Mirror, which can allow you to tutor up a bunch of different things. Obviously, among them, we've got Ob Nixilis. If we need to clear the board, we've got a Brotherhood's End. Obviously, a bunch of Sheoldreds are going to go well with Braids, drawing cards. The End is a great way to get rid of Traxas and things like that in the main deck, or opposing Sheoldreds, which can be a problem, obviously, if we're drawing cards and they've got Sheoldreds. It's problematic for us. We've got a single copy of Bloodletter of Aclazotz. If you've followed any of my other brews so far, you'll probably see single copies of this anywhere I've got a toolbox option going. And on the early end, we can be a reasonably aggressive deck. We've got artifacts. Actually, I should probably touch on Tarrian's Journal. It's just a one-of copy. We're not tutoring for this, but this is another way to gain value off of the tokens from Urabrask's Forge. Sacrifice another artifact or creature, draw a card. Very rarely will we use the discard your hand transform Tarrian's Journal in this deck, but just being able to either sacrifice Mephitic Draughts, which we're playing to sacrifice to Braids, which we're playing to sacrifice to Beseech the Mirror, and so on and so forth. Same thing with Tithing Blade. It's a sacrifice on a stick. And so rather than playing, say, Liliana, we want to be able to play to our theme here of sacrificing artifacts to Braids or sacrificing artifacts to Beseech the Mirror, and gaining value from them accordingly. Of course, when we do, we have the little bonus on Molten Collapse, which is the start of our removal package, that if you descended this turn, you can choose both. It's not terribly common that we want to destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less, but sometimes. And we have that flexibility here in this deck because of our sacrifice mechanics. Usually you can't do it with Urabrask's Forge if you're waiting to the very end of the turn, because Molten Collapse is a sorcery. But it's a versatile removal spell with a little bit of bonus. So we're giving it a run, obviously, in a Rakdos deck. Bloodtithe Harvester is really important here for a handful of reasons. You also just want little tokens to sacrifice. So these blood tokens are better here, more synergistic, like in a vampire deck. Same thing with Riveteers Requisitioner. When it dies, we get a treasure token. Of course, we can sacrifice Riveteers Requisitioner and get that treasure token. We can do what we did in our Light Up the Night deck, Red Light District, use it as a lightning bolt in cases where it draws a card and creates a treasure token. And then we're playing some other janky stuff like Hopeless Nightmare. This card has been better than I anticipated it being in early playtesting. The 2 damage, getting a card away from them, and then if you sacrifice this to Braids, you get to draw a card and then scry, which is super convenient. You don't have to pay anything to do it. Every once in a while, you want to pay the ability and sacrifice Hopeless Nightmare just to see what's on top of your deck. Rounding out removal, we've got a copy of Cut Down. So for early removal, we've got a Cut Down. We've got a Parasitic Grasp, just because we're a little bit weak to, red aggro decks. white aggro decks, etc., their early game is better than ours, and we don't want to be like dropping Urabrask's Forge right as we're about to die. So a single copy of Parasitic Grasp. Again, we can tutor that up with Beseech the Mirror, or just have it in. Nothing exciting about the lands, especially here. Pretty typical Rakdos land base. We're playing 24, which I think is fair given what we got going on here. So without further ado, let's get into it, see if we can make a little bit of progress down here in Platinum.